The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Hello and welcome to the Epic Love Show, episode number 99, where we are sharing inspiring stories of love through action. We have a very special guest today, Gus Castellanos, mindfulness teacher with an extensive medical background and fascinating story. He'll be joining us here in just a couple minutes. I'm your host, Travis Suit. I believe one of the most valuable gifts you could give yourself is love. And I'm here to share stories of how persevering through adversity to bring that gift of love to the world is your epic hero journey. And your journey to become more inspired, it starts right now. So on the Epic Love Show, we are going to cover an interesting topic today on mindfulness. The show is brought to you by the Piper's Angels Foundation for Cystic Fibrosis. You can learn more at pipersangels.org. And we are live each week on Facebook and YouTube. And you can tune in at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and always available for playback if you want to share this episode or any of the others at iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. Big shout out to all of our loyal listeners that tune in every week for all the comments and the feedback and the engagement. We truly appreciate your epic love and continued support. Joining me in studio, as always, is the epic jokester, Mr. Jason, our audio-visual engineer. How you doing today, Jason?
I'm good. I'm here. I have to tell you, my epic love, I love to laugh. So I think the epic jokester is a great name for me.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and you always bring the most epic dad jokes.
I have to. You know, that's my job. You know, it's like not only do I do the audio and the video and everything here, but I got to bring the laughter too. So
you're the man behind the curtain.
I know. Well, you can't do that. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Remember. All right. So I do have I have a food joke and an occupational joke. So which one do you want first?
Let's do the occupational joke.
All right. So did you hear about the dentist who won an award?
I did not.
They didn't give him a trophy, but he got a little plaque. You can't see him right now, but Dr. Gus is shaking his head. This is not good. I don't know if I'm gonna win this.
All right,
we can see him, but the audience can't.
Let's see what the next one sets up for us.
So, just to let you know, and this is a little inside secret about monasteries. Mm-hmm. So when the gentlemen that live in the monasteries, they make burgers. The burgers go from the monastery kitchen. They go from the frying pan into the fryer.
But I'm very nice. I like those this week. Thanks for bringing it. I liked your dance moves earlier to the opening.
I know you couldn't see that either. So yeah. I got to thank you. Yeah, I got to thank you. So I'm like so excited.
So one update here on the Piper's Angels Foundation front is that during the pandemic, we ran a COVID emergency fund relief. And we raised close to $11,000 thanks to all of our generous donors out there. And we have officially exhausted those grants. We have supported 16 families with checks from anywhere from $500 to $1,000, cystic fibrosis families that have run into issues with financial burdens, with the loss of wages, with rent, helping with the cost of food, hospitalizations. Thanks, Dean. Thanks for the comment. So we really appreciate everybody's love and support for our mission with the Piper's Angels Foundation. And we're going to continue to do our best to support as many CF families as possible and continue as best possible to bring as much awareness as well to what's going on and how these families are being affected. So thank you to everybody for your support and your love. So to kick it off, I'm going to read a bio of Gus Castellanos. He's this week's featured guest. And Gus is a graduate of the University of Miami Miller School of Medicine. He practiced neurology and sleep medicine in Jupiter for 25 years. He has been practicing mindfulness since 1998 and teaching mindfulness programs since 2009. He's certified to teach MBSR by the University of Massachusetts Center for Mindfulness and trained at the University of Miami's Neuroscience and Mindfulness Lab. He's currently teaching mindfulness-based programs at a variety of facilities throughout South Florida, including the University of Miami School of Medicine's Osher Center for Integrative Medicine, FIU College of Medicine, the UMindfulness Mindful Kids Miami, and the Sari Center for Integrative Cancer Care. He has trained thousands of participants in his mindfulness classes and workshops, including health disorders. He also teaches specific populations such as nurses, state judges, physicians, U.S. Army soldiers, firefighters, paramedics, and behavioral health specialists. He has been and writes a twice-monthly mindfulness newsletter and serves on Palm Beach Health Foundation's Better Brain Health Advisory Board. On a personal level, Gus has been married to Bessy for 38 years, has a son and daughter who are doing very well, and is an opioid overdose survivor in recovery for over 15 years. I met Gus through a mutual acquaintance who introduced us and have learned his story, which to me is absolutely inspiring and fascinating. We're very, very fortunate to have him on the show today. Thank you, Gus, for joining us.
Sure. Thank you for having me, Travis.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So mindfulness is a big topic these days. And with everything going on in the world, it's becoming more and more important. I would really love to kind of start at the beginning. If anybody wants to check out Gus's website, innerinmate.com, we'll flash it up on the screen as well. There's some really interesting information. It also covers some of Gus's family history in the medical field, which I thought was really interesting, in that your grandfather was a doctor and was nominated twice for Nobel Prizes in medicine, and your father was a doctor, your brother is a doctor, and you as well.
Yes.
And your grandfather was based in Cuba, correct?
Well, yeah, he did the bulk of his work in Cuba, but we all came over in 1960, and he set up a practice, became the second busiest pediatrician in Miami at the age of almost 60, 58, and practiced for another, 60 to 84, so 24 years.
Wow, that's really incredible. So when you got into mindfulness, kind of take us back to the beginning and where that all began for you.
Where I started with mindfulness, or where I started?
Yeah, what the journey to mindfulness was.
Yeah, well, that's a long journey. That's way, way back. Well, to be brief about how I got to mindfulness, it was when I was practicing medicine more or less in the 90s that I was starting to have some issues with, I would say, the business side of medicine. It wasn't with the patient care, and it wasn't with personal problems. It was mostly the way medicine was causing too many administrative problems, legal problems around malpractice and all that, which was causing me to have what I now look back as what's physician burnout. But the term wasn't that popular back then as it is now, or that well known. And I thought I could handle everything myself because of a big shot doctor and a neurologist, and I knew what to do. So I started taking up the wrong habits, which began doing things like workaholism. Actually, was the first thing. The perfectionism and the wanting to get it right as a physician just said, if I'm messing up at being a doctor, I should do more work as a doctor to improve it, which of course made it worse.
Right. And if I could interject, why did you choose neurology when you were younger and getting into that field?
Yeah, it's a good question. My grandfather, as you said, was a pediatric cardiologist. His research that nominated him for all the prizes and research it was with the heart. And my father is a cardiologist. So, and I carry their same name, by the way, which puts a lot of pressure on me, which also contributed to my demise or whatever you want to call that. We'll get to in a moment. But anyway, so it's funny. I went into neurology and my brother went into psychiatry. Neither one of us went into the heart stuff. We went into the mind and brain thing. I kind of was always gravitating to how does the mind work and all of that. But in medical school in the 70s, I found, I hate to say it, the psychiatrist then kind of goofy. So when I hit neurology, I said, oh, this is the right place to go. Really, it's all about the brain, not so much the mind.
Which ended up being a great platform for what you ultimately ended up taking on your path. So let's get back to the story. Thank you for answering that question. I was curious.
No, but feel free to jump in because the story goes all over the place. So anyway, back in the 90s, I'm struggling and things were getting worse. And I'll make this very quick. And I also, in addition to working more, the workaholism kind of thing, I started sampling the pharmaceutical medicines that I would get from the pharmaceutical reps. And I also practice sleep medicine, so neurology and sleep medicine. And if you know anything about those two specialties, you can imagine the types of samples that I got in my office, which would be considered all the goodies by at least the addicts anyway. But all the habit-forming medicines, including barbiturates, Ambien and other sleeping pills, the Xanax, benzodiazepine groups, the stimulants, and of course the opiates. And so I began using them, then misusing them and abusing them. And I wouldn't do it during the day or at work or anything like that, but I was using them too much at night and then mixing them and then having little episodes, little blackouts or forgetfulness and things like that. So it was becoming a problem, and I was urged by my lovely wife that I should go get help. But again, I came in with the, I know what I'm doing. And not only do I know all about the brain as a neurologist, but I treat people with drug problems. And I'm not one of those people that ends up in the emergency rooms overdosed or having all kinds of complications. So I kept putting it off, and, it was denial and that kind of stuff. And then it was getting bad enough that I really knew something could be done, but I was still unsure. And that's when a friend of mine brought the mindfulness-based stress reduction program to Jupiter Medical Center, where I was the head of the sleep center and the senior neurologist and all that. And so used that as an attempt to get better. I went in with the idea that I'm really doing this to see what it might offer my patients. But after being in the program, which was 8 weeks, I started noticing that it was helping me. And it did help me as long as I practiced. So for a number of months thereafter, I was doing a little bit better, sort of headed in the right direction. But then something again happens, another one of those external events in the world of medicine. And so I decompensated and started really getting into the pills even harder. And so what ended up happening, so should I keep going with the story?
Yeah, please. I mean, and were you at that time, could you feel a change, like with your background in neurology, could you feel a shift in the chemistry of your brain happening? Did you sense that or feel that, or how was that coming on for you?
Yeah, so without the mindfulness, it was more being suppressed by, that was the issue. I feel emotions, I feel this and that from the burnout or from the stress or from the negative emotions, and then pop the pills and feel better, as most people do, have that drink and the anger goes away, the anxiety improves. So it was hard to really pinpoint, though, as a doctor treating people and as enough awareness, especially after the first mindfulness class, I could tell that it wasn't really the right thing to do. But the drugs are very habit forming, and it wasn't my drug of choice, the opiates, up until that point. It was mostly barbiturates and sleeping pills. But I started to ramp up after I fell off the mindfulness practice bandwagon and things got worse. I started to get more into the opiates. They were there. And after a number of months of popping those pills, they took away the samples because they realized that wouldn't be a good idea, that doctors could get in trouble with them finally after so many years. But when they took them away from me, now I started really craving them. And I started writing prescriptions for myself. So it's called drug diversion. I write prescriptions with fake names and go to different pharmacies and get the pills that way. At that point, I just said, I'm going straight for the opiates because, I'm not going to waste my time getting something less euphoric producing or
right,
less addicting. But what would happen, of course, is I would walk into, let's say, what were they called back then? Eckerd's, before CVS.
Yep.
Yeah, and you'd walk in, I'd be looking around for security camera to see which pharmacist was there and with a hat on. There's a lot of anxiety and a lot of, don't recognize me and all this stuff to get the pills. I get the pills, I feel a sense of relief, and then immediately thereafter, the sense of shame. So that cycle of anxiety and fear and concern going in to get the stuff, the craving that drove me there, the relief that was momentary, and then the shame and guilt was just getting worse. It started to spiral. And the best way to get to treat that, if you will, was more pills.
Right.
And so I started ramping up, starting doing more prescriptions and all of that. And then after about a year of doing that, I didn't run into a pharmacist comes to the building next door with a new pharmacy. And he comes over and he says, hey, I'm new. Can you send me patients? I would, if you need any favors, happy to, but please send me patients. I just started the business. I'll do whatever whatever favors you need, let me know. So guess what I did? Next day, I'm over there with the prescription and all that. And he gives it to me, and I did it again a month later, maybe one more time. And then about the third or fourth time, he called me up one day. I went over there, got my pills, went back to the office. I get a call, hey, Gus, you need to come back here. I need to talk to you. And I thought, oh, my God, the gig is up. I'm in trouble and this and that. And I guess kind of I was. Because when I went back there, he looks at me and he says, here, and he hands me a bottle of 300 Vicodin.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And he said, here for free. You don't have to keep coming back so often. But I was back in 2 weeks because, at that point, with that amount sitting in my hands like this, I just started it was like a kid in a candy store, as they say.
Yeah.
And so that started a 2-year cycle of I was able to get these pills anytime I wanted them. Literally, if I needed them at 4:00 in the morning, I'd just call him up and we'd meet at the pharmacy and he'd get them for me. Saturday nights, Sunday mornings, middle of the workday. So I had my own, if you will, candy store for those highly addictive drugs, the opiates. And so I really ramped up the use over the years. I got really more impaired. Things were really starting to fall apart. But I was told by many people they didn't know it. I was still able to function pretty well at work because I wasn't popping them at work very much, just
Right.
minor amounts and not withdrawal. So I got through the day, everything was going okay, but slowly you could see the nurse that had worked for me for 10 years, she said, something wrong with you, I'm quitting. And my wife was really getting really fed up because she knew I couldn't hide it at home. I'd be passed out, I'd be slurring at the wrong times. And my kids also started noticing that too. So there's no question it was having an impact on my personal life. But the pills kept going and I didn't know how to figure out how to get out. So I took the MBSR course again, the mindfulness course, a second time, seemingly got some self-awareness because then I started calling treatment centers. But I wasn't quite ready, as we said. I remember talking to one center and the guy says, you need to come right away. I go, and this is July. I go, well, I got to wait till after Christmas because I got things to do. And before that, and I have this and that. He goes, man, if you don't make it now. So, which is a principle. If you need to go, you need to go now. You don't wait till after Christmas.
Right.
So things were getting worse. And then finally I had the insight that says they really, really started getting bad. My wife was on her way out and my kids were gone to college. And so, I kind of had some insight that something was going to happen here. So I tried to detox myself. And in that detoxing, I ended up overdosing. So there's where the overdose came out because I so-called botched the detox. But in a way, it turned out to be the best thing that could happen because the paramedics took me to Jupiter Medical Center. And when I woke up in that intensive care, the first thing I remember Friday morning, the next thing you know, it's Saturday morning. I wake up in the intensive care on the bed, looking up at the nurse saying, I know this place. I'm on the wrong side of the bed here. I should be over there looking down at me.
Wow. That was the hospital you were working at.
Yeah. Senior neurologist, head of the sleep center, well known there for 15 years. I've been really active in the hospital. But that helped me surrender, knowing that I was there and everybody knew, and no matter how much HIPAA compliance, how much privacy and confidentiality there's supposed to be, I knew everybody would find out.
Right.
So they said, I go, what do you want me to do? Go to treatment. I went to treatment for 30 days and they told me to get into a recovery program, which I did, a 12-step program. And I've been clean and sober ever since. So everything turned around and got clean and sober. My wife and I started to get back together and do well. But it was about 6 months later when the FBI comes to me and knocking on the door. Hey, we need to talk to you. And I go, oh no, now what? And they said, we're investigating that pharmacist. And I thought, no way, they're investigating me. And so I got a lawyer. I sat down with the Department of Justice prosecutors, the FBI, the FDA, the DEA, the Postal Service, and the insurance fraud people. And I remember walking into that meeting, I go, man, I can't be this important. What's all this about?
Yeah.
So, but I had some, stability. I was clean and sober, and, was understanding that I needed to just be upfront, hold myself accountable. And so I did. And I told them everything I'd done. And they tended to believe me, but their story was that it wasn't me they were looking at. They were really looking at the pharmacist, that he was using what had ended up happening, using my medical license to commit health insurance fraud. Mm. I never was told what he had done specifically until well after I pleaded guilty to the crime. To me, he was using my license to the tune of $2 million of fraud. Wow. Yeah, so this is why I was a person of interest, and it got included in the case, even though they were going to try to keep me out of it. They had to include me. And so I took the plea because I was told you can't fight the feds and blah, blah, blah. And that they would help me out in front of the judge when I went for sentencing, because I had done them favors of saving time, of saving them money, of giving them some insights that they didn't know about. But when I got in front of the judge just said, no, you're a doctor, you know better. So it's a great story, but you need to go to prison for 3 years and probation for 3 years, and you can't get a credit card or a mortgage, and you're going to need to help pay back the $2 million this guy took, and you're going to lose your medical license. And so at that moment, it was sort of like, that's not quite what we were expecting, but yeah. So you want to ask a question? Or?
Well, no, I mean, that just, it's that part of the journey. I mean, when all of that was happening, what was going through your mind, as you realized that you were going to prison? I mean, what was the hardest part about that?
Well, the hardest part, actually, believe it or not, I had remembered 2.5 years. By the time I got to that moment, 2.5 years of being clean and sober, working a recovery program, which had the spirituality and meditating. I was doing, I think, an hour of meditation a day and an hour of yoga. And then some of the so-called spiritual work that you do in 12-step programs. Work was gotten much better. Family got better. So when that hit, there were, I think we counted 35 people in the courtroom with us sitting behind me. I was like, okay, I guess that's what I have to do. But then all of a sudden I realized everybody behind me was sort of moaning and groaning and crying and stuff. So I felt I needed to take care of them. I did not feel so shocked or upset. Having been, I guess, through the overdose and through a lot of other challenges, I just felt, okay, let's see what happens. The interesting part, though, is you got, white collar crime, was low risk and all that, was sentenced to go to one of those prison camps. And most of the time what happens is you go home and wait till you get assigned to the camp, which usually takes 2 or 3 months. But the judge thought I was some kind of bad guy that was going to run away or something, so he made me go right away. He gave me 1 week. So wow. That was the problem, because now when you talk about, what did he feel like? I says, well, I'm going to try and just sit down, calm everything, and we'll think this through. Suddenly I had to kind of know, wait a minute, I have to close down my practice. I was practicing medicine yesterday, and now suddenly I can't practice medicine because I'm sentenced to prison, found, this. And I have to close down the practice, and I wanted to do it legitimately, legally, the way it's supposed to be done, and figure out what I was going to do and figure out what I was going to do with my family and all that stuff. So that really took up the time and the thinking process. So it really didn't have much emotions, to be honest with you, though.
And when you really were going, I mean, I feel like a lot of people would be terrified, would be really scared as they're kind of going into that environment. Now it's really interesting that you had already been doing the MBSR training. And so you were carrying that tool with you, which, as I've learned as a part of your story, became a really powerful tool for you while you were incarcerated. But I mean, just, what was going through your mind as you entered that environment?
Yeah, walking in was strange because then it was more like, thank God for the attribute of curiosity. I said, I'm just going to look at this as some kind of curious thing here because I don't know what else to do, freaking out and looking around. I didn't feel totally unsafe, but obviously, there was a, look around, be careful, don't talk to people in certain ways. I didn't know the prison lingo at that moment, of course, but that whole bit of walking in there and I'm walking in with some books and some jewelry, no, you can't take that out, you can't take that, drop that, leave everything back, and then they strip search you and they give you these clothes and this bedding, and then go find this room in there. And so that getting to know the system was going through my head initially, and really was sort of, I guess, just focus on what I'm doing in that moment rather than worrying about what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. Right. Or regretting the past. I guess living in the moment. So,
and how quickly did the meditation or the mindfulness become a tool for you in that setting?
Well, you can almost say that was already part of the tool, because in the mindfulness, the way I learned it and the way we teach it, of course, is to be fully present in every moment that you can, not just while you're so-called meditating formally.
Right.
But initially, I went right as soon as I could. I just picked up my practice. And at the place I was in, this detention center in downtown Miami, we were pretty much locked up in a cell with one of myself and my roommate, my cellie, as we call them, cellmate. I would say 16 hours a day, 17 hours a day. We were allowed out a couple hours in the morning, 4 or 5 hours in the middle of the day, and some hours at night. But the rest of the time we were inside the cells. And so when I was in the cells, there really very little small talk you can make with these guys, because everybody was in transition there in the detention center. So I meditated a lot. And so I started picking up my meditation. I was going 2-3 hours there. And eventually over the next 2 years, I picked it up to 4 to 6 hours a day throughout the whole thing. So, and that's why I call it my razor wire retreat. Just sitting in there and doing the most prominent thing I did while those few years was to meditate. So.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to label it, the razor wire retreat. I mean, I have friends who have been to ashrams in India, and that's what they do for a long period of time. They're in meditation for hours and hours each day. Well, thank you for sharing. And you share it in such an eloquent way, and thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story. I think there's a lot of people out there that can relate in some form or fashion, and to the pain. I mean, in kind of my personal story, my journey, what kind of set me off was when my daughter Piper was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis. I kind of went through this turmoil and a lot of emotion and pain around her diagnosis and what that meant for her life and our family. And the pain really became the fuel. And I think, in the world that you work in, a lot of people are facing pain and they want a way out. So they choose these various routes. How would you speak to somebody who's in a lot of pain and looking to ease it?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. And in particular, these few months that we're in this whole new world, for sure, in many different ways. The pain can be a motivator to, and I find, I'll say it's spiritual growth, but certainly psychological growth and evolution of the person, no question. It seems to me that is more of a trigger or a prompt for growth than waiting around and everything is good. In other words, if everything's going well, why would there be any reason to do anything more than what you've already been doing? And so people I see there sort of stall out. So I would reframe it first by saying this if looked at in a certain way and dealt with in a certain way and not other ways, this will help you through. But it may be more painful, if you will, at first before you get past that. So going through the pain rather than around it or avoiding it or denying it is always the way we suggest it. And this is one of the things about the mindfulness that we teach. It's counterintuitive. We take chronic pain patients, physically chronic low back pain patients, and have them turn in toward and be with their pain rather than doing their usual, let me go stretch, let me go take my pill, let me call the doctor, get an injection, whatever it is they normally would do. And it's a major breakthrough for people with chronic pain. So beginning that way, turning towards, but it needs support. It needs support with a teacher or a group that has experience and skill with these kinds of things. I wouldn't just do it on my own with an app, for instance. So.
Right. So, as you came out of that environment, and you kind of had this new lease on life back into the world, you had to reform your entire, kind of career path and identity around something new. So take us through kind of what those early steps were as you began to rebuild.
Yeah, so let me back up into prison because it has something to do with that. And by the way, I met a Venezuelan guy, very nice guy, who got caught for importing cocaine, I guess is what he said. And he was very nice. He wasn't really a troublemaker. And he said to me, I think on my third or fourth day there in Miami, he said, look, in prison, you're not going to stay the same. You're either going to become a better person or a better criminal. So choose that now, and it will help you.
Wow.
And that stuck with me the whole time. You can learn to be a better criminal in prison, believe it or not. So I was sitting in prison, meditating 4, 5, 6 hours a day, not wanting to touch another, especially scientific book or medical books, thinking I'm done with medicine. I turned away my licenses. I don't want to do this anymore, which was another grieving process, if not some psychological issues I had with the grandfather, father, and brother, which not only were doctors, but doctors of high acclaim. Well-known professors. My father was a professor emeritus at the University of Miami, and my brother's the founding chairman of psychiatry at FIU College of Medicine, and then of course my grandfather. So having to live around that as well, but I really was like, I'm done. I don't know. I'm giving up. So I'm sitting in prison, meditating a lot, and people are saying to me, "You should be a sober companion. You can be a life coach. You can be a website designer." And I'm like, what am I going to do? I walk out of here. I just kept meditating. Furthest thing from my mind was to be a meditation teacher, but guess what? That's what I was doing all the time. So it makes sense. I'm doing that, having my mind on that, focusing on meditation. And actually we made a meditation group. 6 of us met every night for 6 months, taught each other different meditation practices. So when I walk out of prison, not knowing what I was going to do, literally I haven't worked a day in my life. A friend of mine helped me out with we tried to do a life coaching business on the internet, but the probation officer came and said that is not something they believe in. They've never heard of coaches. That's not legitimate. We're scamming people. You can't do that. So I had to stop that job after a month. And didn't know what I was going to do. And guess what? I got introduced to this woman in Palm Beach, very wealthy woman living in Palm Beach. Somebody says, this woman volunteers in the prison system. She knows something called mindfulness. Do you know anything about that? And I go, yeah, I did mindfulness. I was just in prison. I got nothing to do. Let me go meet her. So when I go meet her, thinking I was just going to hang out with an older woman that was just going to, we're going to volunteer in prisons and be kind to them, which is great. I thought that was a good idea. She said, no. What we're going to do here now is we want to take mindfulness. Do you know anything about mindfulness, Gus? And I go, yeah, MBSR. I know MBSR well. She goes, oh, yeah, I'm good. MBSR, I'm on the board of the University of Massachusetts Center for Mindfulness, where MBSR started. So this is what she said. I'm on the board there. I'll get you connected with those people, but we're going to take this MBSR into this Hanley Center here in West Palm Beach, the treatment center. And I go, wow, I'm in recovery. And so I go, yeah. And she goes, well, can you help? I go, well, I got nothing to do. I'm in recovery. I know mindfulness, and I got nothing to do. And then she said, oh, one more thing. They just bought something called SPECT scan. They're going to be scanning people's brain. I go, wait a minute. I'm an out-of-work neurologist. I have nothing to do. That's in recovery, that knows mindfulness. And you're asking me if I want that job? So that's how I got started. And she got me hooked up with the University of Massachusetts. I got trained through them, as you know. And also she and I went around back to my medical school, of all places. She said, let's go down there. We'll talk to them. And we did. And they started me. And that's how I started teaching at the University of Miami Medical School in their wellness center. And that was in 2010. So all of that thing unfolded. That's when I knew that how to reframe it, what I should be doing, go this way, go that way. My job is to stay out of my own way. And just to show up, take care of this moment, do what's supposed to be done here now, don't do the wrong thing, and then just go from there and trust that things will happen.
Did the teaching come naturally to you?
The mindfulness, you mean? Or?
Yeah. When you rolled into teaching mindfulness, did it come naturally from the medical background, or did you find that like you had to really learn how to teach?
Yeah, for particularly mindfulness-based stress reduction, it's considered more like a psychoeducational program. It was a big change for me because I'm used to being I am the authority doctor. You got this problem, come to me. I will tell you what I know, what I think, using science behind me, and here's the treatment, giving you the direct answer. That's what you're paying me for. Here in MBSR, we're supposed to allow the client, the participants to come up with their own answers, trusting their own inner wisdom will bring forth whatever it is that they need to do. But, so I would be in my classes early on and be doing things, people say, I'm here because I don't sleep well, I need to relax and blah, blah, blah. And I said, oh man, I still practice sleep medicine. No, don't do that. Do this, do that. And as I got trained and mentored by the people at the University of Massachusetts, they kept saying, you got to stop that. You can't keep giving that straightforward advice. You got to just sit back and say you don't know. And they would even say to me, Gus, how do you know that they need that for their sleep? And I go, I practice sleep medicine. I know. But how do you know that's what they need?
Right.
So that was when the opener said, hey, I really don't know, but they will find out for themselves. And then finally what clicked was, this is, wait a minute, this is my story. How do I know what I'm going to be doing? But somehow it came from within me, or the universe handed it to me, whatever it is that you want to call that stuff that goes on like that. It just happened and it worked out. So now I'm pretty much going in that direction in most of the classes I teach, although in certain cases I do have to answer. And, I came from the point of being a neurologist, knowing the brain pretty well, to now studying the mind. And there's a lot of neuroscience of mindfulness. In fact, I participate in some of that research. And so, it fit very nicely.
And what does the neuroscience on mindfulness say? What are the facts that we know of as of today? Because I know a lot I remember when my dad cut out a newspaper article when I was back in college. I was doing an officer candidate program for the Marine Corps, and he cut out an article that said the Marine Corps is implementing mindfulness, and they were using an exercise on how they're polishing their boots. And so, I know a lot's coming out. So what are the current neuroscience updates?
Yeah. So that program initially, that was called MFIT. So that was the original one. The one at University of Miami, that's done mostly on soldiers, although it's been done on Navy SEALs and other elite special forces. It's called MBAT, like combat, MBAT, mindfulness. But so the neuroscience, it's knowing that with the caveat that it is a changing, evolving discipline, because it's also new, and right. The technology is also improving. What we know is it improves or enhances the areas of the brains that have to do with rationality, the critical thinking, impulse control. This is called the prefrontal cortex up here in front of the front part of the head. It's where we do our thinking and our logic and all of that, and how we dampen especially our negative emotions. It helps with the memory centers. It helps with the centers that have to do with empathy and compassion and meta awareness, meaning you have a bigger perspective. And it's a pro-social practice. And these are the changes that they see in the brain. And they also see the dampening effect of something called the amygdala, which is considered the alarm center, which is hyperactive in things like panic disorders and certain anxiety disorders and PTSD. So it can kind of reduce the activity of the amygdala, making people feel a little bit more normal. And something called the default mode network, which is the area, without getting too technical, that when we're not doing anything, we start our mind wandering, and our mind wanders into negativity quite a bit, time traveling, worrying about the future, rehashing the past, self-referential, self-critical talk. And so all that's dampened down. So
I read a little bit about that in Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind. It talked about the default mode network. So you're saying that mindfulness practice over time, it helps relax that default mode network?
Correct.
Got it. I find the science of it all really fascinating. I could listen to you for hours on that topic. Do you ever give lectures specifically on kind of the science, since you're coming from a neurology background and now mindfulness, bringing it together? I feel like those worlds colliding could not have been a more perfect recipe for, being an expert in this field.
Yeah, no, when I'm asked to do different programs, so in MBSR, we don't really lecture much. I give a half-hour lecture on stress reactivity, which doesn't really include much of the brain, more the autonomic nervous system. And if you ever heard of the polyvagal theory, very, very cool. But the brain stuff, I bring into all the other programs I teach. I use that at the beginning. For instance, in what Children's Services Council is here in Palm Beach? Yeah. Okay. I teach for them, and so I go into that quite a bit for the behavioral health specialists and their outreach specialists. So I put that into most of my so-called workshops, and then I've also been lecturing. I lecture at the medical schools and places like that. I'm now doing a course at Nova Southeastern for the students and grad students, and I bring that into it too.
Fantastic. Is there, from the work you've done over the last decade since you began teaching in this way, is there one particular class or moment or student that has stood out to you over the years that, maybe a student of yours that you've seen a big turnaround or an inspiring kind of story come out of?
Okay, so on that side, it's very, I would say, I don't want to say vague, but what happens in these 8-week courses, you hear a lot of people getting some aha moments, lots of breakthrough and interesting phenomena. What stands out mostly are those the ones that have the trouble, and their mental health issues that pop up, or whatever else they may be going on that we don't always know, because this is not like going to a doctor's where you take a thorough history of the patient and say you have to do this and that. We screen, but they stand out just because of the the impact. But I can tell you some of the things that happened with the when I was practicing medicine. I cleaned. Well, anyway, I was practicing medicine. I was still sending people to the MBSR programs, and I sent a number of my insomniacs to these programs after having tried. These were tough cases that we had. We tried pills. We tried cognitive behavioral therapy, relaxation practices, alternative medicine, and all this, and they still weren't satisfied with their sleep. So I would send these people to these 8-week classes, and all of them came back saying they were better.
Wow.
But some of them would say, I'm much better. Thank you for sending me. This was great, life-changing, but I'm not sleeping any better. And I would go scratch my head and I go, wait a minute, I sent you there to get better sleep, and you're coming back saying you're thrilled with this, but you're not sleeping better? But because I had done the class, I got it. I knew what they were referring to. And one of them I remember would say something like, I am so much more present with my 5-year-old. That is so much, that's gold to me compared to my sleep. So I don't care if I sleep or not. I'm so aware with my family and this and things like that. So these are more like the things. So it's just why we say, whatever you're doing here, whatever your intention, whatever your expectations are from these courses, keep an open mind, stay open. So.
Well, we're getting some great commentary, and I want to say thank you to the audience out there for everybody who's been commenting and tuning in. You have a lot of fans, Gus.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah.
My picture's been on the post office, and so people catch on there. So
we have a question from Lauren Zarimsky. She said, listening to you and hearing about your story now is wonderful. Your story is very moving. Could practicing EMDR techniques go well with mindfulness? I'm not sure. I don't know what EMDR is.
Yeah, eye movement desensitization. It's done for trauma. It's very effective, my understanding, and I work around because of the recovery thing. Very effective for certain types of trauma. I don't know if it would be necessary, but you certainly can do both. The mindfulness done with what we call trauma-sensitive modifications is very useful for trauma, because it's an exposure kind of thing, turn towards the traumatic memories rather than run away from them. So combining them would make sense, but I've not heard of any particular studies that have taken it and done it to see if it's better than either one alone. So,
got it. Thank you for answering that question. How do you know when? So for, let's say, somebody who has never practiced mindfulness and they're incorporating this new practice, how do you know when mindfulness is working? Like the experience, the feeling, What do you experience that it's working?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question that comes up in classes all the time. One of the simplest answers when people are in my classes was, I don't think it's working. I'm not sure I'm doing it right. My mind's still wandering. And yet they'll come in next week and say, but you know what? I still don't think I'm doing this right, but my family thinks I'm doing much better. So outside views. And then frequently what I'll say to people is, we're really not trying to make you a better meditator in our classes. We're actually just trying to give you a better life. In part, that means you define what a better life is. So take a look at what's going on in your life a little bit more than what's going on in your practice. That said, the idea is that as you practice these, depending on whether it's more about focusing attention or an open awareness or a cultivation of compassion, just starting noticing if it becomes easier in the sense of how much effort it takes to do the practices to let's say if you're going to focus on something, is it becoming easier with less effort to focus? Does the mind state put a little bit better? And so you can use those as signposts. But again, I'm more about how's your life going rather than how is your actual practice going, because it's not a linear growth. It's not like every week you get a little better and then you go better and then you get better and it just keeps growing like that. Not at all.
So take us through what, if somebody were to reach out to you right now, an organization, a group, we're going to throw your email and your website up on the screen on the ticker here, but take us through what it looks like, just the logistics of when somebody signs up, or how they would reach out and what that course or class would look like. Is there a variety of options that they can enroll in?
Yes, so that's exactly right. The standard 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction program is what I'm grounded in, because it's the evidence-based. It's by far, it's the grandfather, if you will, of all the modern secular mindfulness movement and all the mindfulness-based programs. It has the most research and evidence behind it. So it's easy for me to go to some corporation or some academic center and say, look, I'm not making this up. It's got research behind it. But many people say, I can't do 8 weeks, 2.5 hours a week. I can't waste 40 minutes a day meditating. Is there something else? And we design programs. For instance, the NOVA research program that we're doing right now, we just took those elements and made it into a 6-week program, 1 hour a week with 12-minute a day practices. And we're having research to see if that helps and all of that. And for children's services councils, I do an all-day session one day, ask them to practice for 4 weeks, come back in 4 weeks and do a half-day session after that. So different things, corporations want something at lunchtime. It's a little bit different. I tailor it to what they have, because again, it's the same principle. It's just about the act of mindfulness, being present in the moment, non-judgmentally, as we say. So. Right.
And with everything happening in the world with the pandemic right now, and, it seems like there's one crisis after another. There's a quote by Barbara Marx Hubbard. She said, crisis precedes transformation. Yeah. And I feel like that happens individually and collectively. So obviously it'd be great if somebody came and signed up for your course and they started taking mindfulness training with you and practicing. But what can people do on a daily basis, just simple things as they're going throughout the day, if they have something come up? I know, like in my family, because we have people who are at risk with cystic fibrosis, there's a lot of concern around what's going on. And so what's something people could do, maybe a daily practice or simple things they could do day to day that would help?
Yeah, so the great question. And I think remembering, for at least the way we teach mindfulness of informal activity. When you're taking a shower, be fully present, feel the water, feel the temperature, feel the lather. So here's an opportunity whenever you're washing your hands, which we're supposed to be doing often, just bring your attention to the hand washing, the sensations in the hands. How's it feeling? Mind wanders away, bring it back. That's the mindfulness technique that we use right there. Same thing with putting on masks. Anytime you hear some news and you get triggered, pause and just notice what you're feeling, noticing your heart rate, or sweaty palms, or tension in the neck, whatever it may be. So there's many opportunities throughout the day during this pandemic. And also when there's something good that happens, enhance that by just really enjoying it. Sit down and just feel it in the body. Don't just poo-poo it and say, yeah, it feels good, and then go on to the next thing, because we have that tendency to be Teflon for the good and Velcro for the bad kind of thing. So at the same time, during these pandemic, to be very aware of anything that positive that happens, and hold on to it for a few moments, if not longer. But the simple act of bringing attention to when you're eating, when you're walking, and we would say driving too, but we're not driving that much these days. Any of those moments of mindfulness will add up and will change the brain in those positive ways as well. So,
thank you. Well, that's fantastic advice. You've got an incredible story. We're landing the plane on the show here, and just have a minute left. Thank you, Gus, for sharing your story, sharing all of your learning, and bringing the value to the community in so many different ways. We really appreciate you having you on the show, and I'd love to have it on the show back again. Thank you to all the listeners out there who tuned in and were commenting. We really appreciate your feedback. If any final thoughts or shout outs, Gus?
No, I was going to shout out to you and your organization. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for allowing me to be here and share my story for that part of it. But seriously, for what you do, thank you so much. And particularly, I can understand how it must be kind of difficult, the coronavirus being a respiratory virus with the CF kids. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you very much. We really appreciate you bringing your presence and mindfulness, and we're going to keep promoting the positive here on the Epic Love Show. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe on YouTube to the show. That's one platform that we're building the audience for and growing, and we just love having all the commentary and support every week. You know, there's a lot of news out there in the world, and we're trying to promote the positive and share inspiring stories of love through action. You can join me next week for our 100th episode celebration with the amazing Dee Dee Lyons. She's an empowerment coach. Thank you, as always, to Jason in studio here, the support with the engineering. And keep promoting the positive out there, folks, and sharing your love with the world. And shine your light. See you next time.